Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and good evening, everyone. Welcome to a Chit Chat with Expert Series Part 1. I'm Nasiha. I am very glad to be your moderator for this evening. Our Chit Chat with Expert series will be broadcasted live for about an hour. As we all know, we are actually broadcasting live from Persatuan Generasi Prihatin Facebook page and through our YouTube channel. So this series is basically a collaboration between Home at Inti Committee, Inti International University Counseling Center, as well as Persatuan Generasi Prihatin. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we are going to discuss on a topic that I think is very much relevant to us all, entitled "Why Am I So Tired?" So I hope by the end of this session we can actually becoming more energetic or being more energized. We have invited an experienced and a qualified panel to discuss about today's topic. Allow me to introduce our expert speaker. He is Dr. Ahmad Faizal bin Samsudin. Assalamualaikum and welcome, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam, and thank you very much for inviting me to this talk.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us today. Allow me to share a little bit about your background to our audience, Doctor. Dr. Faizal is a psychiatrist at Hospital Duchess of Kent in Sandakan, Sabah. He graduated with a degree in Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery and Bachelor of Obstetrics from National University of Ireland in 2006. Basically, we call it as University College of Dublin in Ireland. And in the year 2016, he is awarded with a specialist degree in Doctor of Psychiatry from our local University Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM. Dr. Faizal has a vast working experience in the field of mental health since the year 2008. So it has been about 12 years, and he has been working in several hospitals in Malaysia. For instance, in East Malaysia, in Terengganu, in Klang Valley, in Kuala Lumpur area, as well as currently now in Sabah. Dr. Faizal is very dedicated in educating the public on mental health. Besides becoming a head of department, HOD, for psychiatric and mental health department for current hospital, he is also a coordinator and a consultant for mental health and psychosocial services in Hospital Duchess of Kent in Sandakan, Sabah. Welcome, Dr. Faizal, to today's Chit Chat with speaker series. Just a few gentle reminders. You may use the comment and chat area to ask questions, or perhaps if you would like to share your experience, you are most welcome to do so. If you'd like to share your opinion with regards to our topic, you are again most welcome to do so. So please comment, like, and share for the benefit of all of us. Okay, Doctor. Let's start our chatting sessions. So Malaysians, Doctor, actually have been under MCO for the last 10 months. So it has been almost about a year. Enhanced MCO, conditional MCO, or recovery MCO. So it has been for about a year. So my first question to you, Doctor, how do you think Malaysians cope with this current situations? And from your opinion, does this COVID-19 situation actually affected Malaysian mental health? What do you think, Doctor?
Thank you very much, Ms. Nasiha, for a very kind introduction for me. And also, thank you very much, organizer, for inviting me for today's talk. And first of all, my response regarding the questions, how Malaysia is going to cope with this COVID-19, I would say that not only Malaysian, but this COVID pandemic is affecting all over the people all over the world. So I believe that everybody is going to experience almost a similar effect from this pandemic. So regarding how I think that the people in our country is going to deal with this pandemic, of course, we have to understand that this disaster is actually we can consider some sort of changes in our life. So any changes of our life, right, such a big event, for example, the disaster, can have different meanings to different people. Yeah, but whatever the meanings, I believe that this COVID-19 is something that's going to change us as a person. So I would like to talk that in related to the how the COVID itself can lead to everybody in this country to experience stress, right? So I'm sure that everyone here is familiar with the concept of stress, right? Stress, as we know, right, is some sort of reactions towards certain event that happen to our life, right? So this reaction, it can manifest in a different ways. So what's important is when we are experiencing stress, it makes us that we need to make a certain change to our life, to ourselves. So I believe that Malaysians, we have different, races, we have different personalities, right? But whatever it is, when it comes to disaster, everybody is going to be affected. So I would like to say that there are a lot of studies, right? Papers has been written regarding the effect of COVID-19 to our health. And I can quote one of the articles in the Malaysian Journal of Psychiatry written by our fellow psychiatrists also, saying that there will be an increase in terms of anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and even obsessive compulsive disorder related to this COVID pandemic. So in a general population, I would say that it's going to increase the stress level for all of us. When we talk about stress, right, I would like to bring the attention of all the audience regarding this analogy. We call it bucket stress model. Imagine, all of us has our own bucket with different size, right? So every day when we go through life, when we experience events in our life, we are going to feel certain amount of water inside these buckets of ours, right? So from time to time, this bucket sometimes it's become nearly empty, and sometimes it's will become less. Depends on what we do with this water. So whenever we have additional stress coming into our life, it's as if we are pouring more waters into our bucket. So when this COVID-19 came to our country, right, it's like we have started pouring more water inside our own buckets, right? And we have been emptying our own buckets, from time to time, using the way that we know to cope from daily stress. For example, maybe we do some exercise, maybe we talk to people, and sometimes we try to solve the issues that we have, and sometimes we do some relaxation technique, and we are doing this from time to time. And what we are doing is going to keep we'll stop our bucket from becoming full, right? But when this COVID-19 come to us, right, maybe suddenly a large amount of water start to pour into this bucket, and it can become overflow. So when it's overflow, then that's the time when we started to experience the stress itself. For all you know, right, people will often ask, right, what actually contributing to this stress that when we are in a pandemic, right? We have to know that we have been practicing this usual norm from time to time for many years. So when this COVID comes, right, there are a lot of adjustment in our reality, in our daily living. I give an example. For example, at the moment, we have a group of students, many students can no longer went to university or colleges, or even a student can no longer went to school to study as usual, but they have to study from home. And even for employers and also employee, they also start to working from home as well, right? And then at the same time, we can no longer do the things that you usually do. For example, in a certain states, we can no longer eat outside. We can no longer do these recreational or physical activities outside, right? And at the same time, also there might be changes in terms of our own financial situation. Maybe because some people have to be, fired from job. Some people will be paid lower amount of salary, and some people they totally unemployed because of this situation. And we can see this has been mentioned and shown various time in social media. So with all these changes, definitely is going to affect ourselves. And I would like to also to further explain that when we talk about stress, right? Stress is not always a bad thing. Yeah? Stress is something that is usually a normal thing that is happening in our life. Whether COVID comes or not to our country, there will all be a stress in our life from time to time. But rest assured that certain amount of stress is needed for us to increase our achievement, to push us to, for better performance in life. But when the stress become increased to a certain point, it's no longer become beneficial, but it can lead to a lot of various issues, especially issues related to mental health itself. And to a certain situation, it can even lead to mental illness. So that's what I can just say about how COVID-19 is going to affect us all. I mean, some people might still able to accept it as a normal stress. Some people might experience more stress than usual, and some people might even develop psychiatric illness because of this COVID-19. Maybe that's what my response to that question.
Faisal, for your explanations. I think in current situation, I believe that the change is perhaps inevitable. So we need to actually,
Yep.
as you mentioned before, adjustment is basically is part of is part of important in current is important a part of and parcel of current situation. Basically, change and adjustment is totally not bad, right, doctor? So it's
Yeah.
not something that is
Exactly.
bad. So
Yeah. It's not bad, but it's not something usual for everyone to have certain changes in their life.
mm, mm. So I really like where you talk about the bucket stress model analogy, the overflow. So how do we know that our stress is basically something that is abnormal, something that is that need further assistance? So is there any symptoms or characteristic that might suggest that we actually need further help? What do you think, doctor?
I see. Thank you for the question. So this is more of how we are going to identify that we actually is having overflow or excessive stress, right? So the thing about stress, right? When we talk about stress, people talk about emotion, people talk about thoughts, right? But we have to remember this is actually involving our brain.
Mm-hmm.
We do have this, five senses, that we use from time to time. But sometimes we forgot that our brain is also is a sensor, the greatest sensor of it all. Even all the five senses that we have is related to main brain itself, right? So as I told earlier, when we go in a certain event, certain changes, our brain detects these changes from our five senses, maybe from what we see, from what we listen, from what we feel, right? Or even our own body reactions. So this is going to tell us that whether we have normal stress or excessive stress. Usually, we can divide this into at least three, right? Three, which is number one is physical symptoms. So when people is experiencing additional stress, usually it can come as like somatic symptoms, for example, headaches, feeling lethargy, difficulty sleeping, poor
Mm-hmm.
appetite, or sometimes increased appetite. I mean, a change, not necessarily less, but could be also excessive sleep, or even excessive energy to some people. So this is how it manifests as a physical symptoms. Second thing, it also usually is manifest as emotional changes. Usually we start to feel more anxious than usual. We start to feel easily irritable. Sometimes we feel sad and fearful. So these changes. And the third thing is our thoughts. Maybe we started to think negatively about things. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we used to be very positive about things, but recently, since COVID-19 is increasing, right? We started to feel negative towards things in life, towards ourselves, towards the world, towards our future, towards our colleague or people around us, so our thoughts. And maybe the fourth one, I would say that in terms of what else, behavior, our own behavior. Yeah, our behavior may change.
Mm-hmm.
Some people who used to be very active and suddenly become quiet and like to spend more time on their own. And some people may started to, use recreational drugs, or maybe even smoking more, or even take more alcohol, right? And some people may started to become maybe aggressive towards others,
Mm-hmm.
started to neglect their responsibilities. So this is the way how we're going to detect whether we have excessive stress. Um, um, I want to explain that, right? Since you were asking about how we are going to detect, there are misconceptions that stress is equivalent to crazy, gila, or mental illness. We have to understand that there are things which is we call normal stress, which is the thing that we experience from time to time. I mean, all these feelings, whether it's positive or negative feelings, right? It still can be considered as normal feelings. Even feeling sad is part of us as a human to feel, even feeling angry, right? But when our feelings started to become more intense than usual, excessively angry, even excessively happy or excessively anxious. And this feeling started to become prolonged instead of
Mm-hmm.
brief, of transient, it become more prolonged. And then after that, it started to affect our functioning as humans, maybe in terms of our productivity at work, productivity in studying, you know. So this is actually a cues that we are might be experiencing effect of mental stress, which is excessive or overflow.
Mhm. Is this actually the same as pandemic fatigue, Dr. Faisal? So is it the same? So basically, is it the stress, overflow stress, is it similar to pandemic fatigue, or some said kelusuan minda? So what do you think, or burnout, Doctor? What do you think about that?
I say, if you Google or you search through, excuse me, school social media and all that, from time to time you will find this terminology, pandemic fatigue, plus one minda, burnout, and all that. Actually, burnout and stress is very directly related. I
Mm-hmm.
even would say that it's actually like siblings lah, or maybe the same. But
Okay.
some people say that burnout is something which is more chronic, but stress can be something which is can be transient, but it also can become chronic stress. So when we talk about pandemic fatigue, or even I think recently, one of in my YouTube, I mentioned about how our Ketua Pengarah Kesihatan, Datuk Tan Sri Nur Syam, right,
Mm-hmm.
saying something about kelusuan, SOP, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Uh, all these are considered maybe pandemic burnout. You know, so what is all this burnout? Burnout, has been mentioned by ICD, International Classification of Disease. It's not really a diagnosis, but it's actually as a factors that when it happens, it can affect the way how we seek professional help for our health. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to address this issue of burnout. And if okay, I would like to share something about what is actually this burnout consists of. Usually it consists of three things. Number one, when you say burnout, is about feeling lethargy,
Mm-hmm.
exhausted. That's number one. And this exhaustion can be physical exhaustion and also mentally feeling exhausted. Even though you are not doing much work, you're staying at home, but you still feel exhausted, right? That's number
Mm-hmm.
one. Number two is in terms of you started to have these negative feelings or negative thoughts. I give an example. When at the start of COVID, right, we have been introducing with all these PKPs, MCOs, tempos, and all sorts of variants of PKP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe at first we feel like, it's something new, it's interesting. And I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe some people even feel excited about it. Wow, something cool, you know. We never experienced this in our life. Now we are in PKP, you know. So maybe at first everyone is started to become, very how to say
Excited.
excited, started to
Mm-hmm.
practice,
Mm-hmm.
heighten
Mm-hmm.
feelings lah to do all this. But after a while, we started to feel that I no longer felt like I enjoy doing all this, washing hands, using the hand sanitizer, even our hand become dry, even I myself noticed that, my skin start to become, easily can be torn, and then,
Mm-hmm.
you have to wear mask all the time, feel like so suffocating, even in
Mm-hmm.
my own hospital for past few months, we have been, wearing face mask and face shield almost all the time when we are working, not full PPE, but even in the normal daily clinical work, we have to wear this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people at home, they can no longer get out, to take a fresh air, do the things they want, have, eating food outside with friends, you cannot do that. So this is the time where you started to feel, negative, like what I'm doing, how am I going to do this? Is what I'm doing is going to contribute to control of this disease.
Mm-hmm.
All these kind of feelings started to come to you and haunting you.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to feel distance from your responsibility, right? And number three is when you started to see that your functioning, right, is to become
Mm-hmm.
affected. For example, you're no longer interested. Like I said earlier, your functioning as a worker, as an employer, maybe as a student start to become affected. That's actually burnout or pandemic fatigue.
I see. So basically,
Mm.
it's involved not just a physical symptom, but it's also involved on how one's activities of daily living are being affected through COVID-19
Yes,
situation. Okay,
yeah,
so
definitely.
Mm. Okay, so I'm not actually a full-time clinical psychologist because my main job is as a lecturer. But I've received a lot of several of my students have been in touch with me, expressing their difficulties of not being able to see their family members. Some of them actually have not been at home for about a year because they are from mainland China, and not just students. So students who are Malaysians who are actually live in Malaysia. Living their with their family, they are actually also having a challenge whereby they need to take care of their little sisters in between their class time, and not just for students, for my colleagues as well. So since we have been working from home, so sometimes we need to juggle between job, and for those who has small children, they need to take care of children while juggling between meetings. So not just us, the frontliners, especially I believe your colleagues as well, that are all frontliners. They also have their own challenge. So based on this, a couple of scenario that I have shared with you, Doctor, can these difficulties cause burnout, like you mentioned before? Can this actually contributed to pandemic fatigue or burnout that you mentioned before, Doctor? What do you think?
Definitely, definitely. When you look at what is happening, these are changes in our
Mhm,
reality, in our life, right? So
mhm,
changes comes with costs. You see, but the issue is, I would like to share that, what happened to most of us lah. I mean humans. When we are struck by disaster, by stress, usually we started to have these negative feelings. We feel like habis lah. Uh, I'm going, my future will be, dark,
mhm,
I can no longer finish studying, I can no longer work, I will never recover from this situation, lots of feeling dread, from what's happening to us. Yeah. And usually most of us stop at that point, trapped in our own bubble of negativity, not knowing what to
mhm,
do, sometimes we succumb to this effect of our own emotional, stress and exhaustion. Yeah. But supposedly we should move to the next step, which is started to ask some question. And before we ask this question, I forgot to add, right? Whenever we experience negativity, whether it's feeling, whether it's thoughts in our life, right? Instead of just dismissing it, it's
mhm,
very important for us first to embrace the feelings, to acknowledge that we actually is having these feelings, whether it's sadness, fear, dread, guilt, or whatever the negative thing that we have. Instead of just dismissing it, it's nothing, it's not important. We don't do that. Number one, we have to embrace it. And the next step, once we start to experience and feel how it is, then we have to start asking. Now I'm feeling like this. Do I like feeling and experiencing this kind of thought, this kind of feeling, or this kind of behavior?
mhm,
Definitely no. I want to be better, right? So the next thing you should ask is, what can I do about this so that I won't forever trap in these negative bubbles in our life,
mhm,
you know?
mhm,
So that's what you should do lah, right?
mhm. So it's very interesting when Doctor mentioned about acknowledgement, acknowledging our emotions or our feelings. So I believe it's part of Asian culture, not really acknowledging our emotions. So we don't really talk about emotions with perhaps nowadays it's getting better, but usually Asian cultures, Asian families don't really talk about emotion with our family members. So what do you really think about that, Dr. Faizal, when talking about
Okay.
acknowledging feelings? Yeah.
Yeah. I do agree with you when we talk about acknowledging these negative feelings and thoughts. It
Mm-hmm.
also affected by our own culture, our own education. Yeah. So the question is why we have such maybe negative feelings about talking our negative feelings, or negative
Mm-hmm.
thought, or share it with certain people that we trust. Why is that? Maybe it's because that we ourselves believe that if we share, this feeling, maybe it meant something bad for us. You know, for I give example, why some people want to talk with certain people and not talk with certain people? Why they choose people to talk? For example, I
Mhm.
want to talk with my close friend, but I don't want to talk with my parents. Why?
Mhm.
Maybe there are something they are they're afraid of, right? So if it's something that is beneficial to you and important to you, I believe that you will do your best. For example, if you like someone, hmm, I like this someone, whether I'm going to approach this person and talk and express my feeling, or I just hide it and let it be and let something happen, magical things happen, you know, something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if this is important, I have to say we are going to express it, you know. So it's important also when I talk about embracing feelings, acknowledge and embracing feelings is okay, it's important. But the way how it's expressed is also important. It doesn't mean that I'm angry. Yes, I admit I'm angry. I embrace the feeling of anger, but I'm not going to let my action, do whatever it is because I'm angry. And for example, we start to hit people, we start to destroy things. This is not alright. The feeling is okay, but the action is not alright. So when we talk about this Asian culture, I cannot say for the whole Asian culture. Maybe because
Mhm.
we are still in a very what we call it conservative, culture. Maybe afraid that whatever we say will be judged. Maybe that's
Mhm.
the reason. If people judge us in the positive way, maybe we feel that it's much more easier for us to share. But if you say that, that I'm started to feel stress, stress, what? Oh, tak boleh stress. Actually, I started to think that I want to hurt my my life. I would think I want to kill myself. What? No, 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 no. You shouldn't feel like that. This is a very dangerous thought. This is a very sinful way of thinking and feeling. You know. So maybe that's this is kind of response that may stop people from experience. Sharing with people. Just
Mhm.
there are many other reasons. Yeah.
Mhm. So the most important thing that I actually think the most important step is basically embracing the feelings. Yeah, doctor. So that is the first important step for us to actually overcome the burnout or any what you call it as any mental health illness. I think the most important thing is for us to embracing feelings. Is that right, doctor?
Yeah. Embrace. Maybe a better word is validate the emotion, validate the feelings.
Validate,
Yeah.
validate the
We have to
feeling.
understand there are difference. Validate and also condoning. Or totally accept. The behavior and all that.
Mm. Okay, so there's a question from our audience just now from Miss Azaliza. So she actually asked, what is the normal duration of stress? And how do we know that we are not actually functioning well? So what do you think, doctor? How long is the normal duration of stress? And how do we know that we are actually not functioning well?
Okay. Thank you, Azra, for asking this question, Puan Azliza. Okay. Very important questions. Regarding the duration, right? I would say that for each people, the duration of stress, normal duration of stress can be different from each other. Yeah. But uh, according to the classification, for psychiatric diagnosis, right? For example, if somebody started to feel depressed almost every day, more than 2 weeks, consecutively, right? And it's associated with additional symptoms, for example, loss of pleasure, change in appetite, and change in sleep, and then started to have more negative thoughts, and then after that, maybe you started to become more slow in terms of your movement and also your speech, right? So then you might have clinical major depressive disorder. So I would say that if the symptom is occasional, maybe once in a while it comes and go, it's not persistent, then it's considered normal. It's very hard to put how many days, but I can say that as long as it's less than 2 weeks, but we have to understand, right? This diagnostic criteria is
Mm-hmm.
more of a guide for us. There are people who started to feel depressed almost every day for 1 week, and then it's associated, for example, with a lot of depressive features like I mentioned earlier, especially like what we call it anhedonia, lack of pleasure, lack of drive to do things, and started to, some people have death wishes and suicidal ideation, and people also have this change again in physical symptoms, for example, sleep and appetite. You don't have to wait that for that patient, uh, to become more depressed for 2 weeks before you bring this person to seek professional
Seek for
help.
help. Mm.
It's good. When it's become, what's important is intense, is persistent, is affecting your productivity or your functioning, then you bring to seek help. But I think maybe I can add lah, before you bring the individual straight to the professional help, there are things that you can do lah. Actually, there are ways that you can do.
I see. Okay. So you mentioned, Doctor, basically, we can actually, as a way forward, Doctor, basically, we actually have a ways to overcome this. Would you like to tell us more about it? Anyway?
Sure, sure. So there are many ways to do this, but I would say that number one, very important one is taking care of ourselves. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Before we started taking care of others, so what we call it, carrying the carers, yeah, which even we, I and my colleague as a frontliner and also healthcare worker, we have to think about taking care of ourselves, number one. And before we move on to what sort of method that we can use to self-care for ourselves, right? Number one, I think the most important one is manage our own expectation, meaning we have to be realistic. What I mean by realistic is we have to understand that in this world, there are things that we concern about, the things that close to us, related to ourselves, to our people around us, and also things that we concern which is outside our place or our own, house and all that. So what I want to introduce a concept where what we call it this circle of concern or circle of control, or circle of influence. We have to start to identify that, there are things that which is we are concerned about, which is within our control, and there are things that we are concerned about, which is outside our control. I'll give example. Your own health, what you say to people, how you communicate to people, where do you seek, news or information regarding COVID or regarding your own health is within your control, at least within your control. Or how you react to others, also within your control. But other things, yeah, for example, how these cases in COVID to become whether it's increasing or reducing. There are things that we can play a role, but we can really control how the virus acts. Maybe we can really control how the government is going to introduce this policy. We cannot control how our bosses are going to make these new norms for us. Or maybe stop us from traveling to certain place or ask us to wear masks and using this sanitizer all the time. So when we started to notice this, and we started to become helpless and maybe hopeless to a certain extent. So we focus into the things that we can control. That's what I want to stress on. So how about the things that is important to us but outside our control? So what we can do is we have to forgive ourselves for the limitation that we have. And maybe we can do something that, can in a certain way can influence the way how things are going to happen. For example, if all of us, by Malaysia, started to practice this SOP, follow what the government say, from time to time, if one of us do this and we started to ask other people, to do the same thing like us, I'm sure the cumulative effect is going to affect how the COVID starts as a whole. So this is number one point, which is I think very important to understand our own limitations. Okay. So number two, we know that during this COVID time, the usual, so-called the negative emotion that we might have is fear and uncertainty and anxiety. So usually this is related how we get the news. As you know, there's a lot of portal outside there. Even people started to spread fake news, false
Mhm.
news to us.
Mhm.
So we really have to select which channel that we get our news from.
Mhm.
Where we get the information regarding the COVID, regarding the spread and all that. So that's, I think it's very important.
Mhm.
So let's say you have been using social media from time to time, right?
Mhm.
But you notice that I become so overwhelmed by this information. Maybe you have to start to reduce your social media consumption. And to a
Mhm.
certain extent, you might consider to totally stop the social media consumption, you know? So that's number two. And number three, talking about self-care again, before we move on into counseling, all these things, it's very important that we take care of our general health. So make sure that we have good diet, balanced, healthy diet. We do exercise. We have adequate rest. We try to get adequate sleep and all this. By doing all this, it actually makes us healthy. And at the same time, it helps us to, regulate our moods better. You know?
Mhm.
Maybe that's
Mhm.
number two. And number three, I also share with my patient, it's very important for you to schedule your daily activities because previously we are living with a non-COVID, situation. So if we practicing the same schedule during this COVID time, I give
Mhm.
example students lah, right?
Mhm.
Student did complain to me, doctor, we become stressed lah, doctor now. Why? Because this COVID, we stay at home, but we still continue all this, our society, our this persatuan and all this. We still do the things, still the same norm and all that, you know. So it's very important whether it's students or we ourselves start to adjust our schedule. So in our
Mhm.
schedule, we put not only a working time or study time, but also allocate your recharge or rest time as well, and
Mhm.
put this at least three type of activities to help you to feel better. Number one, activities that make you feel loved, appreciated,
Mhm.
acknowledged. For example, maintain your connection with your loved ones, with your friends, with your family members. Yeah. Number two, activities that make you feel good. For example, you can start share good information about COVID. You help other people. You do things that you are talented. Writings. Some people write poems. Some people, like singing. They started to become
Mhm.
better singer. During this COVID time. And the third one is pleasurable activities. If you cannot find what sort of pleasurable activity that I want to do, you just Google suggestive good pleasurable activities. It's very easy nowadays. You get all the list and find a cheap, inexpensive one for you to try. Yeah. And number four, I think number one, two, three, four, five. Number five is like I said, spend time with your loved one. You know, maybe
Mhm.
you can take every day, maybe 5 minutes of your time to talk with your family members or somebody that you
Mhm.
really trust and you love, or talk with your colleagues, or maybe talk even with your supervisor and your, people are working under you as well. How you are feeling during this time. Actually, it can be very helpful so that you can get support from them. You know, and also I said just now, establish your daily routines. I said that already. And also, it's very important also minimize things that can affect your health. For example, I mean, it's best if possible to stop smoking,
Mhm.
alcohol, and drugs.
Mhm.
This we all know, right? But the things that we usually take, for example, caffeine, we also need
Mhm.
to consider reducing it. I mean, all this, substance, even though at first it feels good to take it, right? But in the long run, it's going to affect your mental health itself. Is you going to take it in the long run. And let's say you have difficulty stopping smoking or alcohol or even drugs. I would suggest that you seek professional help how to deal with this, and that will make
Mhm.
your situation even better. Yeah?
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing that you can consider doing
Mhm.
during this COVID time. Yeah.
Mhm. Before seeing
What's that?
an expert and seeking for expert professionals, so try to actually do whatever techniques that you have mentioned before, right, doctor?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Maybe I need to add a very important one that I forgot to add, which is
mhm.
the relaxation technique.
Mm-hmm.
Relaxation technique. I think nowadays, if you search through, the Google, the internet, you find that they'll suggest you do this deep breathing exercise or slow breathing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if anyone want to ask me, maybe later I can share how to do it. This is very important. Either meditation or some people do yoga. This is very important. And last but not least, I would like to say that because when you are experiencing stress, it affects different aspects of your life. So when you
Mm-hmm.
want to manage your stress, also it has to be uh, multi-angle as well. This is very important. What we call it holistic. So if, for example, a patient comes to see us, healthcare professional, I would say
Mm-hmm.
that number one is physical. Physical usually involves something, the suggestion that I give just now, about take care of your health, rest, exercise, and all that. But also, biological or physical need is what we say, medication. Some people they may need medication if they started to have psychiatric illness or very excessive stress. So that's number one. Number two, you have to do in terms of psychological way. So
Mm-hmm.
meaning, for example, counseling session, using all these coping strategy tips that we just share, this is a psychological way of doing things. Number three is in socially. What we can do is we have to adjust the way how we interact with others in our life, so that we have better support, so we reduce also conflict. And last but
Mm-hmm.
not least is also very important is spiritual or religious aspect. We have to go back to what we are lah. So for example, for we can do praying, make dua, this is very important, for our
Mm-hmm.
mental health as well, as well to manage the stress.
Mm. So it really catches my attention when Doctor mentioned about control what are within our control and understand our limitations. So as a person, and scheduling. I myself find it very difficult to separate between work and personal life, especially working from home. I believe that my colleagues are also having such difficulties as well. So. When you mentioned about relaxation technique, is there any like perhaps one simple relaxation technique that you have shared with your patients that you found that they can actually practice it daily, and they can actually gets better in terms of relaxation technique? Which one technique that you would like to suggest to us all, Doctor?
Yeah. Uh, for me, I think the simplest one will be slow breathing or deep breathing exercise.
Okay.
Because you see, we use this breathing exercise actually in many aspects. For example, to manage your anger, to manage your impulse. I mean, to make you feel better when you are panicking. It's also help you to make a better decision when you are feeling overwhelmed. Because we have to understand, right, about our brain. Our brain, right,
Mm-hmm.
we have different centers, which is the impulse control center, the planning center, the memory center, and also
Mm-hmm.
the emotional center, what we call like limbic system, and all this. What happened is when we started to have this emotional, disruption, or dysregulation, our emotion become overwhelmed. So
Mm-hmm.
if we don't do anything about it, to cool it off a bit, usually it becomes short circuit. So our brain cannot reach the part of the brain which involve control our impulse, planning, and all that. So I give an
Mm-hmm.
example. You start to feel angry about something. For example, you're angry about your friend for, skipping work. See, I'm so angry. You didn't come to work today. Now I have to tanggung, all your work lah, right? And you become
Mm-hmm.
so angry and you want to call him and scold him over the phone. But when you start to notice that, I'm feeling angry, you know, then what you can do is do this slow breathing. By doing this slow breathing, you get more oxygen, you make you feel better, and it's allow you to start to think more, to be more aware of your feelings and your thinking. So
Mm-hmm.
the technique that I usually share, there are a lot of variation of this technique, but I like to use this 5-5-5 techniques lah. For
Okay.
example, I give example. For example, if for Muslims, right, I'll say that you do this slow breathing 5 times after each time you pray. That's number
Mm-hmm.
one. And how you do it? Okay, you find a comfortable place. You can see, sit comfortably on your chair, like what I'm doing right now. And then
Mm-hmm.
maybe some people they close their eyes, some people they open their eyes, and maybe if you want to have some aroma, I mean perfume or aromatherapy or maybe a very slow relaxing music also you can put at the background. And then once you close your eyes, then you start to inhale slowly. And when you inhale slowly, in your own count, you count 5 when you start to inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and after that you hold for 5 seconds, and then slowly you release another 5 seconds
That's good.
through your mouth. And then how it is different from your usual breathing. When we breathe, from time to time, we don't really realize that we have been breathing.
Mm,
You don't realize that, but this is a
mm,
conscious effort of breathing slowly. So when you breathe, as you inhale, you expand your stomach like a balloon, you know.
mm,
And after that, when you exhale, you fully exhale through your mouth slowly and fully. So
mm.
do it few times. Some people say that they do it for a few minutes, 5 minutes, or sometimes they do it until they feel much better. So that's
Mhm,
my simple advice lah for relaxation technique that you can do. There
mhm.
are others.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Faisal. So I think there is a question from our audience, Miss Afira. So she asked how to
Sure.
be more adaptable to changes. So how to make us comfortable in adapting as there is always some resistance in doing so. So what do you think, Doctor? How to be more adaptable to change?
Okay. I would say that all of us, right, we have different sets of coping strategy. Uh, so from time to time, we know that maybe we believe that we can cope well. Sometimes we can cope less than other people or that. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's unique to everybody. But when it comes to something that affecting you, you have to do
Mm-hmm,
something about it. So meaning you have to change the way how you cope. So that's why I'm saying just now is to learn the technique how to self care,
mm,
like what I mentioned earlier. That's number one lah. And number two, let's be more specific. For example, um, you can ask yourself, mm, in the past when you experiencing difficulty in your life or hardships, what ways usually that you have been using to cope with stress? Maybe you can try to adopt what you do that works in the past and use it this time. Maybe it works, and if it doesn't work, maybe you can adjust it. That's one way lah.
mm-hmm,
Another way maybe we have to understand that it involves trial and error. Usually things that make us feel uncomfortable or stressed because we have something that we really need. If we already feeling fulfilled, usually we don't feel that much discomfort lah. So what we can do is to look for, identify what is actually the issues, what is the problem. So let's say we are feeling overwhelmed. There's so much thing that we want to solve. So we have to start, uh, list down all these issues that we are thinking about. And after that, we prioritize which one is important and urgent, which one is urgent but it's not important, which one is not important, it's not urgent. So we know which one we can dismiss, which we can
mm-hmm,
focus on. And also we have to identify which are the things that we cannot change. Meaning if something that we cannot change, we have to learn to accept it. So number one is problem solving technique. Identify, then you describe what is the option, then you evaluate each option that you use, then you do action, and after that you learn from the way that you use what works, what doesn't work, and then you repeat the process. Ideal, identify, describe, evaluate, action, and learn from it. Okay,
mm-hmm,
that's problem solving technique. And let's say there are things that you cannot solve in the short term, but something can be solved in the long term, meaning you have to do something with your feelings. You cannot say, this something, or I cannot solve this will settle in 5 years' time, and all that. And then say, yeah, je lah, let it be lah. You cannot do
mm-hmm,
that. So this is where we move to emotion focused coping. meaning we have to do something without our feelings. Again, practice the relaxation technique, but also I would like to highlight regarding this what we call cognitive behavior technique. It's actually specialized psychotherapy, usually done by I think Miss also doing it, yeah, as
Mm-hmm.
a clinical psychologist. We psychiatrists also doing it, right? So actually, it's what it says is actually what we feel, what we think, what we feel, what we think, what we do, and also our physical symptoms actually is interacting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
One changes to one can affect another. Maybe for that one we have to go for another session for more detail. But
Mm-hmm.
in short, I want to say that let's say you started to feel something which is negative. You know notice that you're feeling negative a lot of time. Then
Mm-hmm.
what you can do is you capture these or these thoughts. Then you can examine it. You have a lot of thoughts, right? But you have to
Mm-hmm.
choose which one is the most popular and the hot thoughts. When you have these thoughts, what you can do is first you ask, this thought is opinion or is it a fact? Or
Mm-hmm.
you have to ask that. What is the evidence that what I'm thinking is actually true or false? Number two.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, what is the benefit or disadvantage of thinking in such a way?
Mm-hmm.
And number four, maybe what sort of thinking error that I'm doing by thinking in such a way. Okay, thinking error
Mm-hmm.
also warrant another session. But I want to
Mm-hmm.
say that very quickly. For example, jumping to conclusion. Something
Mm-hmm.
happened, you make generalized conclusion to it or for something. Or you have black and white thinking. Or maybe you are discrediting the positive thing that you have, but you maximize the negative things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe you started to burden yourself with all these what we call it difficult words. For example, I must, I should, I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't. You give a lot of difficult rules for yourself. So changing your thinking is important.
Mm-hmm.
When you cannot change your thing for whatever reason, what you can do is you can change your behavior. This
Mm-hmm.
also can affect how you feel. You can also just change how you are feeling. I give example. If you started to think about past experience or certain memories that make you feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
then you can also started to consciously making effort to think of positive, cheerful, happy memories to make you feel better. You can do that
Mm-hmm.
also,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So how to become resilient? As you practice this self-care, you learn from what you are going through. From time to time, you will learn more techniques. You will become more adaptable in more situations. And also,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important not only to rely on yourself, but also to rely on others as well to help you. And of course, pray also lah. It's very important.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting when Doctor mentioned that basically we also need to change from ourselves, as well as we also need our support system, basically, Doctor. So
Yeah,
actually we have one. I think we can only accept one last question from Mr. Sankanath. So his
yeah.
question is basically, Doctor, is it true that by eating chocolates can reduce the level of stress? So what do you think, Doctor? Is there any specific food that can actually reduce the level of stress?
Okay. How would I say? Food is actually just now kan I did mention about how it's important for us to take care of our general health, right? Eating right kind of food, choosing our meal and all that. So when you take chocolates, when you take coffee, when you take all this food, it does have effect actually to your mental health. So I would like to rest regarding the chocolate. I would say that when you take chocolates, right? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
chocolate does can make you feel better to a certain extent. But
Mm-hmm.
again, too much of good things can be bad also, right? So you have
Mm-hmm.
to be moderate lah if you're taking chocolate. If
Mm-hmm.
you are not worried about your weight, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
maybe I think it's okay for you to take especially dark chocolate to help with your moods. But
Mm-hmm.
don't depend just take having chocolate from time to time. Then when you started, excuse me, gain weight, then you started to feel depressed again,
Mm-hmm.
feel stressful again. Yeah.
So it's like a vicious cycle then, because you're stressed and you
Yeah,
eat.
yeah, yeah,
Then,
yeah,
so
yeah.
thank.
I mean, people do it to release their stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like I said lah, uh, I think the important things that the concept I want to highlight here is about sacrifice.
Yeah.
Um, Whenever you don't have something, actually you are sacrificing something for another thing. I mean, give and take lah. I mean, give and take.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for example, if you take a lot of food without any restriction, right? And you feel happier, you can eat a lot of things. But as a consequence, the sacrifice you take is to your health, maybe to your own image. When you look yourself in the mirror, you start to feel bad about yourself. Maybe it's not so wise to enjoy just taking food. So what we
Mm-hmm.
can do is, when we want to do something, must remember what sacrifice that we're willing to make. So it's about balancing between these two, the risk and also the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, moderation is very important lah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah,
Faizal, for answering those questions and for sharing the tips and the techniques. Actually, we have several other questions,
yeah,
Doctor. However, since we are running out of
sure.
time, we are unable to answer all those questions. So we would like to first sincerely apologize to the audience as we can't actually answer all those questions. So on behalf of Home at INTI Committee and INTI International University Counseling Center and Persatuan Generasi Prihatin, I would like to again thank Dr. Faizal for sharing this tip, for sharing all his experience on this topic entitled "Why Am I So Tired?" So, for any of our shortcomings, Doctor, we would like to sincerely apologize. Thank you so much, and perhaps we can see each other again in the future, Doctor.
Yeah, inshallah. Thank you very much, the organizer, moderator, Ms. Nasiha, and also Generasi Prihatin, and all the audience that has been staying with us for this session. My pesanan is kita jaga kita. Yeah, stay at home, stay safe. If you can stay at home lah. Okay. Assalamualaikum
Inshallah.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Doctor. So, before we end these sessions, I would like to highlight a few important points that were shared by Dr. Faizal. First, whenever you have a negative feelings, make sure you acknowledge, validate your feelings, manage your own expectations about your life, accept your own limitations, and try to do a relaxation technique, the 555 technique that has been shared by Dr. Faizal just now, and make sure to prioritize your daily life scheduling. I think is perhaps an important step for us to overcome stress and to overcome pandemic fatigue. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. Please be informed that we have our the part 2 of the Chit Chat with Expert series will be conducted on 26th of December on Saturday at 10 to 11 a.m. in the morning. So with another interesting topic, navigating the stressful new normal. So please tune in for this another interesting input by a clinical psychologist from IKIM, Institute Kefahaman Islam Malaysia. So Encik Khairul Azhar will be the panel on that day. So I hope everyone enjoy today's Chit Chat with Expert series part 1. Please continue to like, share, so that this discussion may benefit those who are unable to join us today. Thank you very much for joining the sessions. For any of our shortcomings, we would like to sincerely apologize. Hope we may see each other again in the future. That's it. Assalamualaikum. Take care and please stay safe, everyone. Thank you.